In this last section, I want to talk just a little bit about some historical US outbreaks and then how we can prevent disease and how we use microbes as food. So in 2011 is when there was that cantaloupe case that I told you about earlier of Listeria monocytogenes. There were approximately 200 cases and 33 deaths, including one person who had a miscarriage. In 1985, there was a Listeria outbreak in Queso Blanco, so it's a unpasteurized cheese in Southern California. This was the largest number of foodborne illness deaths ever recorded in the U.S., 52 deaths, and that includes 19 stillbirths. So that's basically a stillbirth is when someone is so pregnant that if they were to deliver the child should be able to live. So we're talking very end stages of pregnancy. In fact, sometimes they thought they were going to deliver the baby and the baby was no longer alive. It's very sad. And also 10 infants. And we also had an E. coli O157H7 outbreak in the spinach from Salinas. I told you about that before. 300 illnesses, 3 deaths. And when I was a kid, I'm probably much older than most of you, my mom would never let us eat at Jack in the Box. And that's because, one, we didn't live very close to a Jack in the Box for a long time, but then there was one close to us. But ground beef in Washington, at some of the Jack in the Box in Washington, caused 700 illnesses, 171 hospitalizations, and 4 deaths of children, all under the age of 7. So my mom was like, nope, no Jack in the Box for you, which is, whatever, it's fine. And this led to E. coli being classified as a contaminant of meat. We didn't think of E. coli as being a meat contaminant before. So it wasn't until this that E. coli was listed as a meat contaminant. There have been outbreaks of salmonellosis, peanuts from Georgia in 2008, 200 infected, 9 deaths. 1985, it infected 5,000 people, causing 9 deaths in milk in Illinois. Hepatitis A, green onions from Pennsylvania. So somewhere along the supply chain, those green onions got contaminated with someone's feces who had poor personal hygiene. More than 600 illnesses, 4 deaths. So death isn't terribly common from hepatitis A, but it can happen. So how do we prevent disease or spoilage of food? One way is through canning. So canning uses heat under pressure to kill the majority of microorganisms. What can sometimes happen is if the canning process wasn't done appropriately, you can have some bacteria that will survive, and they're usually heat tolerant. That's what thermophilic means. And they're anaerobic. They don't need air. So when they're in the can, they're fine. And sometimes they can produce a sour taste to the food. They can produce gas. So if you ever see a can that has a bulge on it, that means that there's contamination and you should throw it away. A lot of times that can be botulism. Botulism does really well when canning isn't done appropriately. You can also refrigerate or freeze your food. This doesn't necessarily prevent your food from going bad. We all know that if you leave food in the fridge long enough, it will go bad. Or if you leave food in the freezer long enough, it will go bad. For the most part, for a lot of these organisms that cause human disease, the temperatures in the refrigerator are cold enough that it prevents the microbes from growing. However, there are some organisms like Listeria that love the cold. They do well in the refrigerator. That's what psychrophile means, cold loving. We can also dry foods, things like jerkies, right? If you remove the moisture from the food, that can allow you to keep the meat out indefinitely because you have to have that moisture for the microbes to grow. We also use irradiation. We can use UV light to sterilize processing equipment. Here, what they're showing you are strawberries that were either not irradiated or irradiated, and what they looked like after 15 days of storage. So you can clearly see the difference. We also have chemical preservatives, things like acids that can lower the pH. Salt throughout history has been very, very common as a preservative. Sugars work as well. They change what's called the osmotic pressure. But basically it has to do with they cause some of the moisture to come out of the bacteria and prevent them from being able to grow. And you can use antimicrobials as well. Like antibiotics are sometimes in food to prevent bacterial contamination. I don't always recommend it, but that's what you can do. And finally, we also do pasteurization. We have traditional pasteurization, which is at about 63 degrees for 30 minutes. There's high temperature and ultra high temperature, but those can't go for very long because basically that will make your milk taste bad. So this is what's traditionally done. It doesn't remove all the microbes, but it hopefully removes most of the ones that would make you sick. And then of course we can consume microbes as food. Fungi, I don't know about you, but I do enjoy mushroom on my pizza. And I've been, for I don't know how long, working on trying to make my own bread. So you use yeast to make the bread rise. And of course, for fermentation, for beer and wine, you can use yeast as well. And for other fermentative products too. Algae can be consumed, nori or seaweed. Bacteria can even be directly consumed. Some of the cyanobacteria, the spirulina, that's bacteria. That's a microbe. And we can use we can use microbes to make food too. So I mentioned using yeast to make bread. So they produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. We use microbes to make cheese and other fermented dairy products. So, fermented milk, buttermilk, sour cream, yogurt, different cheeses. And there are lots of other fermented foods too. Vinegar, acetic acid is made by certain kinds of bacteria. Sauerkraut and pickles are made using microorganisms. Green olives, poi and different soy products, fermented meats. And again, I'm not going to necessarily ask you, well, how do you make a sauerkraut? That's not important. But again, it's showing you that even though the class is called Revenge of the Killer Microbes, sometimes we can take advantage of microbes and they can do really great things for us. And I guess I'll leave you on a nice note, hopefully. We use microbes to make fermented beverages. So this could include, again, things like kombucha, but we typically think of it in terms of wine and other alcoholic beverages. So wine is grapes fermented by specific type of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, right? Brewer's yeast, and it's about 12% ethanol. Your distilled spirits will be distilled from fermented grains and other carbohydrates. And then, of course, beer. And again, I'm not going to ask you to know the beer making process, but if you're interested, here you go. But you do need those microbes in order to make beer.